Okay, let's begin. I am Lanice Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive, healing-based conversations designed to illuminate the adoptee, parents, and the adoption curious. We center the topics around community, mentorship, leadership, and healing, so you get a multi-dimensional view that is ultimately empowering. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. Hey y'all, if you've seen me on Instagram, I'm in my summer glow phase and I am unapologetic about it. My hair is luscious. Fun fact, I didn't start properly treating and doing my own hair until I was a grown adult because like many Black adoptees, no one showed me how to do my own hair. And because I love you all so much, I'm going to share with you my hair secret. I'm always on the lookout for things you'd love and things that will enhance your well-being inside and out. Unique Cosmetics sent me their Moisture Lock pomade and scalp and hair therapy oil from their Metamorphosis line, and it's so decadent, light, and nourishing, fam. This has become a hair routine staple. It has a soft lemongrass scent that people comment on when I walk by or when they're doing my hair because now I have boho locks. They also sent me a 15% discount link for you to try their products and hair tutorial service. And Unique Cosmetics is Black owned and operated by a mother and daughter duo dedicated to helping the adoptee community. Check out the link in the show notes. And this is for all ages, fam. So tell your friends. So come on, embark on a hair-loving journey with We Unique World. From interactive workshops to premium products, they're all about empowering you to embrace your unique hair journey. Because remember, all hair is good hair, especially when it's healthy. Hey y'all, how you feeling today? How's your heart? I know I haven't asked that in a while. I'm trying to ask more questions, more varied questions, and I hope that you are asking that of yourself, because it's such an important question of how is your heart. I hope you're feeling the wonderful vibrations of summer, because I sure am. It's glorious. You know how I do. I'm headed to all the pop-up art and street fairs to support local artists and mingle with humanity again. Today we have the vivacious Matthew Anthony, who is a writer, essayist, and the host of the podcast Little Did You Know. We go deep into social justice issues today, fam. This is not for the faint of heart. For those of you who may wind down with this podcast, know that there is a lot of impassioned language, profanity, the N-word is dropped. Just know that all of that is coming. I love that this podcast inspires people to be the full expression of themselves. We do not temper anyone here, so let's do it. Today we talk about the celebration of reclaiming your name. We discuss James Baldwin's work, whom I love. We discuss the definition of love and what it's like to have adoption separate you from your sibling. I commend Matthew for his exquisite vulnerability and the passion that he has for his work. It's deeply palpable and powerful. My favorite quote for today's episode is, "I'm just a child of war too. We're told not to trust the way we know the world." This conversation is impactful and deeply heart-centered. So let's get started. So let's talk about your podcast and where did that come out of? How's it doing? I listened to an episode. It was very illuminating. Where did that begin?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So the podcast is called Little Did You Know, and it's an abolitionist podcast that's seeking to reveal the precarity inherent in transracial and transnational adoption through centering the voices of impacted people. And so, in 2020, I've grown up my whole life as somebody Black in Blacklist places, and so I knew that was because I was adopted. I knew a lot. I knew a lot about anti-Black racism because of what I've experienced it. But in 2020, Hannah Jackson Matthews had won this poetry contest, and I was just new into knowing that there were people called adoptees, and And so I submitted this poem called like God's Gift is Transracial Adoption, because like my name Matthew means gift of God. And like I was learning that like a lot of adoptees experience like saying that they were like a gift from God to their adopters, you know? And so like I didn't get told that specifically, but it's kind of like in the name. I knew my name was changed. So I was like, well, they probably were thinking it.
What is your name?
Well, I just found it out that my first name wasn't changed, but my middle and last name were changed. So Matthew is my original name, but then my government name is Matthew Charles Bogart. And so yeah,
How do you
but yeah.
feel about that? Do you want to reclaim it at all? I reclaimed my
Oh yeah.
original name.
Yeah, I'm definitely like, even with like, I'm definitely reclaiming it even in a real cheeky way, like because the name Bogart means to take and withhold. And that is exactly what the fuck happened to me. Like, as I've been in reunion for the last year, and like I'm talking to my father, and he's like, yeah, like I hired PI to like find y'all. And every time like your doctors would like move you and all these different things. And so like very much know that like my twin and I were taken and withheld, you know, and knowing the kinds of abuses that we experienced, and just like and so like even in writing like on my Substack right now, like I'm doing these essays that are like bogarting, like I'm taking different like Black influences and like taking it, trying to like reclaim bogarting even in like an honorable way. How do you take something into yourself and give it credit and really honor and value it as holy and sacred? Because that's not what happened to me. Me being bogarted, I was not taken and held as holy and sacred. You know, I was desecrated, you know? And so yeah, like, so my name now is like Matthew Anthony, Matthew Omowale Anthony. Omowale, that's a Yoruba translation of it means the child is returned. And this is what my mom said when I met her last summer. She said, God gave my babies back. And so like, I was just like, bet, that's my name now.
Yeah.
And so that name was also special to me because like growing up, like people would say I looked like Malcolm X and I didn't know who that was. So I had to like go watch the Malcolm X like movie by Spike Lee and then with Denzel Washington. And then like, that's like a crazy connect because I was like, oh, I guess I used to have like different glasses. So I was like, oh, I kind of see that. And then I was talking to my father like a couple weeks ago and I asked him, I said, all right, like I know what my mom was going to name me because I've seen the documents and da. But did you have a name for me? Because all his kids, his sons all have D names. And so I was just like, and there's like five, six of us. And so I was like, were we going to have a D name too? And he was like, yeah, I was going to name you Danzo after Denzel Washington. And I was like, damn, like the interconnectedness of this whole thing. And so like the Omowale is kind of like an ode to my father and the Malcolm X and to like my mom and just like the reality that like I've been returned to, you know, like it's this celebration, you know? And so I'm definitely, and then it's like, fuck Bogart, but then I'm trying to like be cheeky and like reclaim it in a way that like, whenever my adopters see my writing, they just gonna be like, oh, fuck that. Like, I can't believe he's doing that.
But
Because
who cares? Honestly, it's your life.
exactly like that's the kind of like truth that I feel like I have to be able to tell to myself, like to like it's a simple thing to say, yo, you shouldn't quote unquote adopt a child and take them to a sundown town where they live their life and they're getting all these different kinds of abuse, medical abuse, all these different things, and like it's a real crisis. That shouldn't be a radical thing to say, but my adopters take it as it is, and I should just be grateful, right? And so it's just like to tell our truth because this violating institution, like it, the way, like Daniel Drennan Alwar talks about it, like it's the way that it privileges these adopters and family creation, right? Whereas like, what does their family creation require? It requires the decimation of mine. And so that's not how adoption is practiced in societies all around the world. Like I spent time in Tanzania and like it's real kinshipy over there. It's like, oh, this person in the neighborhood.
It's on another level. And I think
exactly.
that is an American trait though.
Yeah.
Because I had this conversation yesterday with another adoptee just about, I spent some time with my sister who is not biological. And I just needed a place to crash because I had a subletter and I just left a gig. And my mom said that maybe it was too long of a time for me to have stayed with my sister. But if we're kin, then it doesn't matter, right? Like, where are the parameters when it comes to a family like in need, or a family that member that just needs you to step up? Like, where are the parameters? And with a lot of adoptions, we adoptees don't know the rules that everyone else has built and set in place for us. And we stumble in the dark trying to catch up a lot of the times.
Yeah, because I mean, these are legal rules and social rules. Like in the family that you're adopted into, you don't know how they treat their own family. Like, you don't know their protocols for people in crisis. So you would think, like, for me, I would think that if my family was in crisis, I got their back. And so then to me, it's a violation when it's like, not only is it the exact opposite of that, but my family is the ones putting me in crisis. And so it's just like, goes back to what Shannon Gibney talks about with epistemological violence, right? Like, we're brought into these families, they do family differently. Like, that's like really what is going on too, is it's like, not only do we not know the rules, they do rules differently than Black people do rules, right? White people are not a communal people, right? Black people are. Black people have always been. And so, like, you're also then brought into this white society, which already at best doesn't know what it thinks about Black people. And at worst hates them, right? And so, like, you're having to reckon with that. And then, like, a word I use for it is Banjiha, where, like, this comes from the Korean language. And, like, because the Korean adoptees, a lot of them, their diaspora, like, they come as children of war, like, after the Korean War, And so I think about Banjihas were kind of like bunkers that they would build to save themselves from, like, the bombs and stuff. And I think that that's, like, how I describe, like, what it was like for me growing up, like, mentally, like, you're in this Banjia, like, you're only there by yourself, and it's this wartime situation type of thing. Because, like, the truth, like, in my situation, like, there's a war on drugs in this United States, right? Like, now we treat it differently because of heroin, but it was crack, and it wasn't the war on drugs. It was war on Black people, right? And so and why was there a war on drugs? What is happening in the 60s and 70s before that? Black revolutionary movement, right? And so, like, we know that COINTEL exists. The government told us that. The government told us it put crack into Black communities to prevent the rise of the Black Messiah. It told us these things. So then when it destroys our families, and then I'm taken because white people wanted a child, right? It's like, well, I'm just a child of war too. Like, it's that simple in my situation. Not to say that it's like that for everybody, but for me, I'm understanding that. And I feel like that's where, like, when it gets to telling our stories and our truths, right? When people have stories that are true, that aren't nice, it's hard because us as, like, quote unquote adoptees, we know each other a lot. We talk to each other, like, in community. So we have built up this kind of capacity to, like, handle these kinds of stories. Like, I know a lot of people who, like, are taken. Like, I had this mentee from Ethiopia who was like, yo, one day I was there and then the next I wasn't, like, to be, like, in community with people that are having these stories, this is a terrible thing. But it's something that we do because who else knows what it's like to be taken, I guess,
Yeah. Well, I want to swing back to your name and reclaiming your name, because I actually took the last name from my Haitian family as my middle name. So I was adopted as Lunise Antoine. My mom changed it to Lanice with an A, and Shelley. And then in high school, without asking for permission, and I don't think I ever needed permission because it's my name, I changed it from the original adopted name to Lanice Antoine Shelley. And as soon as I did that, everything clicked. Everyone just fell in suit, and no one really questioned it. I said, this is who I am. This is what it's going to be. And if you want to be in my life, you will be an active participant in how I want to be addressed. And so I applaud you for your way in which you have played with your name, what you're discovering within that, your cheekiness and all of that. I celebrate with you, and I hope that you continue to do that. I want to go into your artistry, your poetry. I actually bought your book, You Cannot Burn the Sun, the digital volume, and I was struck by quite a few pieces, but so many of them are socially aware. You are just activated, my friend.
I mean, that book I'm writing it within the uprisings of 2020, within it.
Okay.
So like, I'm just saying what I see around me. That is all that's happening in that book.
So how long have you been a poet?
My whole life. But being a poet is a way of knowing, Like poetry is really imprecise. You know, you do your best to get precise, but, you know, I call it the precise cut of mystery. And that's because, like, our life is a mystery. I have nothing to look back to. So, like, when I do the family tree thing in school, I just know the name of my mom. I just know the name of my father. I can't trace any further back. And so here's my family tree. It's me and two other people. And so, like, it's a precise cut of mystery. And it's a way of knowing the world. I think a lot of adopted people are poets and they don't know it. And I think a lot of that is also because we're told to not trust the way that we know the world. We're told that the way we know the world isn't the right way to know the world. There's all this binaries around right and wrong. And the world isn't really a binary like that. That's a colonial construct. So, like, once you can break out of that, you realize that poetry is easy. And so it just kind of flowed out of me for If You Cannot Burn the Sun. And it's always kind of flowed out of me just because I've always had something to say.
Hey, I want to share with you something that has changed my life. It's more like my therapist. Why is she so important? Well, because I want to win in this life. I want to break through the carousel of stories I've compiled that hold me back, that keep me from expanding into my full potentiality. Stories of unworthiness, not enoughness, and even stories of questioning why I am here. I also want to stop dumping my unsorted feelings on the people around me and reacting with the same behavioral patterns that keep me stuck. Conversations with my therapist have made me more confident, clearer in my intention, and more centered in my spirit. That is why I am elated that we are sponsored by BetterHelp, where you can, from wherever you happen to be right now, match with a therapist tailored to your exact needs. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. Someone who you can text at any time and schedule online for either a chat, Zoom, or phone call. And if it turns out that your therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. Visit the link in the show notes, betterhelp.com, when they were young, to get 10% off the first month. You need to click the link in the show notes in order to get the 10% discount. I want to see you win, beloved. Let's do it together. Visit the link, betterhelp.com, when they were young. I love that phrase, we're told to not trust the way we know the world. Can you give me an example of that in your life as you were growing up? Because so many adoptees have struggled with that. And that's exactly why I created this platform, was because I felt that growing up, when I was young, I was gaslit the whole time, and told that what I was seeing was not what I was seeing. What I was feeling was invalid to the wants and needs of other people. And so I created an opportunity for us as adoptees to reclaim our names, reclaim our voice, reclaim our narrative, and say, no, it is just as valid. And my history began before you adopted me. And this is my story. So when was that for you? Do you have examples of how you felt that you were essentially gaslit?
Yeah, I mean, so in a dramatic sense, in a dramatic example, but not dramatic because it's a child example and it's real. Like I was on the playground as a third grader, and 8 years old, I seen like 4 Black people in my life, my twin and I, and like this Black girl in my class and a Black guy in his. And so I didn't know what Black is. I knew I was different. I knew that the 4 of us were different. We were different shades. Like the other 2 were light skinned, mixed. Yeah, they were both mixed. They were both biracial. And then my twin and I, we didn't know if we were biracial or not. We had no fucking clue. We just knew we were like darker. So like, are we the same as them? Are we not? Right? There's this real unknowing, this imprecise thing of like, we're probably similar at least. All I know is us 4 are not like these white people. And then this white girl at recess, this 5th grader, like comes up to me. And I'd never talked to her in my life. Her name was Haley. I didn't say her name because I've never forgot this moment. And I hate that because I've forgotten so many other things I wish I could have remembered. And so she says, you know why you're Black? And I remember inside, I really believed she like, I was like, oh, is this the thing that I am? Like, if it's called being Black, then no, I don't know what that is. And if there's a reason for it, I also don't know the reason. So like, you're a 5th grader, you're 2 years older than me, you're gonna tell me? Like, yeah, like, I don't know, please tell me. And so like, I tell her like, nah, like, what is it? And she says, it's because God put you in a toaster and forgot to take you out. And that's like a little kid joke. We can look back on it like that, like, ha, 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 ha. But like, that's a real epistemological violence. That is my first time becoming aware of what Black is, being associated with being forgotten by the creator of everything. And I am adopted by missionaries who talk about God all the time. So the idea that God forgot about me is actually central then, because everything that they teach me is about God, the 10 Commandments, and obey your God says this and God. So like, it's a huge thing that is happening on this playground. And I just believe them because I don't know anything better. I've got nobody to like ask about this. Right. And so like, this is like, you know, some of that ties back to why I say you cannot burn the sun. Right. Where it's just like, nah, like I've had to reclaim memory. I've had to reclaim burning. I'm a lot more fire than y'all are. And so, June Jordan has this quote. She talks about the kinds of lies that deface the memory of the father from the lies that deface the father from the memory of the child. And those are the kinds of lies that I routinely was told. They were able to be told, and I only believed them because I never saw my father's face. I never saw my mother's face until last summer. And so I believed I was forgotten by God because God was white. And everything I see about Black people is terrible. They tell me that Black people are in prison because you're a more criminal race. Nobody says anything else. So I'm like, okay, I am this nigger that you call me because nobody else, James Baldwin, he talks in The Fire Next Time. This is a favorite book of all time, his letter to his nephew. Because he says, yeah, so like in The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, he's writing this letter to his nephew, and he says, you can only be destroyed by believing that you really are what the white world calls a nigger. I tell you this because I love you, and please don't you ever forget it. The truth about my life is I did not have anybody to tell me that I wasn't a nigger. Everybody was telling me I was a nigger. And so James Baldwin says, love is saying you aren't a nigger. So then I did not have anybody that loved me because the first time I was called a nigger at a church thing, I went to the person who adopted me and I said, hey, he just called me a nigger. And she says, it's okay, honey, go back to work. So I'm like, okay, James Baldwin is teaching me what love is now. not my adopter, because whatever she thinks love is not what I can allow love to be for me. What she thinks love is an epistemological violence on me. And so, yeah, I've always been a poet because I've had to figure out that imprecise cut of mystery. And doing that within, when they tell you you're a nigger and you believe that and you feel so numb inside, but you had to choose to become numb because it was so hard to feel anything. And then it gets to a point after a couple of years of numbness that like you question, am I a sociopath? Because you don't feel anything. And then you realize you have to like start feeling things again. And then you're so scared to do that, you know? And so like the kinds of gaslighting that happens, it's that I was destroyed and I had to choose to build myself back up because nobody was there to help me at all.
Wow. I love James Baldwin, and I used to be a poet. And Matthew, I just want to acknowledge the vulnerability in what you just said and how hurtful it was to hear that you were put in a toaster too long. And that was God's way of dealing with you, punishing you, whatever it was in that person's mind. And as a child, a lot of times we carry those wounds. There are comments like that were made to me as a child, people not understanding why my poems were lighter than the backs of my hands, why I had a broader nose or richer hued skin. I don't say dark, I say richer hued because dark is part of a supremacist vocabulary. And so understanding that these are a lot of the stories that we as BIPOC adoptees have experienced at the feet and hands of the people who adopted us, that we were not protected. And quite recently, I came to the epiphanal thought that we do not need, well, I've always known that we do not need saving, but I realize that we need protecting. Children need protecting. This woman contacted me on Instagram needing advice on her adoption, which is not my forte. I responded with some questions, and one of those questions being, why are you adopting? And she responded, because I want to give a home to a child that does not have a family. To which I responded, the child does have a family. You need to pivot your way of thinking to them already being lacking, deep, entrenched in scarcity, and you saving them from that scarcity. To perhaps providing comfort, providing protection, providing shelter. Those are simple human needs that everyone can identify with, and takes us out of the saviorism that missionaryism is shrouded in. Because I came from a missionary household as well, so I totally hear you. I had instances like that, at church, just the awkwardness of negotiating. If this is the definition of love, do I want it? If this is the definition of family, do I want it? And those have been the questions that I continue to grapple with, and redefining, reclaiming, shifting the narratives have helped me exponentially get to a place of peace with the harmful things that were said in the past by little kids. And those things are never funny. They're not funny now. They weren't funny then. They're deeply harmful. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. You did not deserve that. And acknowledging that we are so vulnerable. We were so vulnerable when we were young. And even now as adult adoptees, still negotiating and navigating the traumas, the microaggressions that we were constantly pummeled with. I just wanted to ask you a question about this piece called With. A dear friend messaged me on Facebook. I stand with you, brother. Black skeptic I am. I replied to her, so you're coming to the protest? My question, a test I knew the answer to, no. You stand with me in platitudes and know nothing of with-ness. You may be standing, but it certainly is not with me.
Yeah. And what do you want to ask about that one?
So I'm guessing that happened. I think a lot of us Black people experienced that around 2020 and figuring out what those relationships were when Black Lives Matter started to pop up on people's profiles. And yeah, I'm curious as to the definition of with-ness when it comes to social justice for you, because I know that there are a variety of ways of solidarity. What does with-ness look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, with-ness has looked very different for me over the last couple of years, like since 2020, because I've been displaced a lot over the last couple of years. And so I've just been cropping up in different places. And so I haven't been with people really. And then being the pandemic, like I'm still trying to figure out how to get my body back from like all of this stuff, like with-ness for me is me being with myself in the sense of like beyond the name, but like taking back myself. Like there's so many like violences that I've experienced that like I'm having to like restory those to myself, reorient how I orient to these things, like I'm coming off a divorce right now that like happened in some ways because of the ways that adoption and the ways that the pandemic and the ways that whiteness as revealed in the uprisings, these things compound in this interesting way of just like race relating in intimate ways, right? And so I've been like profoundly like rendered into crisis because of all those things connecting at the same time at a time when I was not ready for it. So I'm just writing poems and I'm just writing a book and I'm just like trying to figure out how would they say no weapon formed against me will prosper? But the weapon was formed. The weapon was formed though.
But has it prospered? I mean, it might have defeated you in a battle, which happens to a great majority of us, all of us, not to devalue your experience, whatever it is that you're experiencing right now, but has it prospered past tense? Is it prospering present tense? Like, where is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's different levels, right? Where like as a whole human being, you always got your angels and your demons and everything in between. That's a positive, negative, and a neutral. So like, I definitely got a lot of positives, a lot of neutrals, and probably a lot of negatives. And that's life. I think I'm in regards to like Nugi Watiango talks about like the decolonization of the mind, right? So in regards to like freeing my mind up, I feel like my mind has not been like more free. My heart has not been more free before. And then it's that freedom that like is hard for me in a different way, right? Where like you see things differently all of a sudden, the way that you're connecting things, the space that I'm creating out of, where I'm using twin gods to Kahindi and Taiwo to tell a story of should abortion have happened and what happens to gods who are taken, right? Like to tell stories that are wrapped up in like other ways of being sacred and do it knowingly that like you're doing this in the context of like, these people where I grew up, they really believe their God is real, right? And so what I had to know is I didn't have the same God as them, whatever that meant. There's at least two gods, probably more, 1,000, whatever. But like I saw that there was a kind of power they organized around with their God. And that was like, so I couldn't deny the ways that they knew things. I could say like it's a violence against me. I can't say that it doesn't exist, you know? And so like I'm trying to like reorient into like other ways of being sacred, because like I know that the sacred is a grounding and has been for people throughout millennia, all time. And so like I'm trying to restake that. And for that, ghazals have been super clutch for me. So yeah, I don't have to answer your question.
Well, where were you adopted from?
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I read a story and heard the story on your podcast about South Africa, and I didn't know if you were literally from the continent, but you talk about being stolen from the continent. I just want to loop back to this idea of with-ness, because I'm curious. It's a question that I have for myself, because I know that my default is to go into solitude. I don't co-regulate. I self-regulate. And I learned to do that because of those instances where my caregivers couldn't hold space for me. They didn't understand what it was that I was going through and that sort of thing. So I have learned to self-regulate to a severe degree, where asking for help and receiving help is really hard for me. It's a level of vulnerability where I'm like, have to be conscious about this. Okay, this is me receiving help from you. And so when it comes to what happened, what is still happening since 2020, did you feel a level of solidarity, with-ness from the family that adopted you and from your twin brother at all?
The family that adopted me, no. No, I haven't heard from them. And aside from the woman who would like me to call her mom, I have not heard from any of them in like brothers in years. And so that's fine. But so that's where it's just like how we do family is different. And then in regards to my twin, like my twin is what they call it rehomed when we're 14, 15. So I haven't seen him for almost over a decade. Like I've only seen him like 5 times. So like the way that we do with-ness is very like fractured, because we were separated again when we were kids, because our adopters didn't want him anymore. So, and they wanted me, but not him. And so like, that's some fucked up shit that like we're trying to sort out in our own relationship, that we've only seen each other 5 times again since, so like our with-ness is on Facebook Messenger.
I haven't encountered another adoptee who had been rehomed as a grown person. You hear that?
We weren't. He was a child. He was 14 and still a child. That's not a grown person. Your brain ain't fully grown until you're like 22 years
14, old. Okay. I usually see articles that around that, it happens with children. And I recently saw a play in New York where a 6-year-old was going through being rehomed, and it's devastating. I'm so deeply against it, and for educating these families that want to adopt about the devastation of that word, of that deed. And so we don't have to go into it today, but thank you for sharing that and for just unraveling this poem and the idea of with-ness, because I really appreciate the wordage on that and the idea of what it means to be with me or against me. And I do see time and time again with adoptees that those with and against is so huge for me. And there's not much room for gray. for me. And I'm very perceptive. I'm very decisive when I feel that you're with me. And
Yeah.
if I feel that you're not, then choices need to be made.
Well, but this is a survival skill. Like I'm this way too. Like I have a number of close friends. Like we talk about how perceptive we are, and we know that it's because we had to be growing up because we were unsafe. So we had to see what was going on. We had to know what was going on. We had to be able to identify, is this person safe or not? Because for me, I had to know, does this person think I'm a human being or not? Or do they really believe I'm a nigger, right? So like I have to be able to sight glance you and know that and know who you know and what might influence that in a moment, And so we're perceptive as a survival mechanism because we're survivors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had no other way of existing. I want to make sure we touch on your pursuit of Black history and making sure that our voices are heard. I heard on your podcast with Daniel, what's his full name?
Daniel
Daniel.
Drennan El-Awar.
Yes. He's actually going to be on the podcast tomorrow.
Dope. Tell him I say hi.
Yeah, I will. I invited him after that conversation. I was just so curious about his story. So, talk to me more about your work in resistance and what that looks like and what your dreams for the future look like.
Yeah, I mean, it's looked different in different ways, right? So you talk about the piece that I wrote earlier called "Don't You Know You Were Stolen," and like in that piece, I story about my time in Ferguson, like after Mike Brown is killed. So I've like been in the front lines. That's 2016, 2014, something like that. And so I was in Occupy Wall Street, like when I was a kid. But other than that, like where I'm trying to like reorient myself now is like as a storyteller, like the French would call them griots, but like others would call them jollies, like the people who are like hold memory and like institutional memory and like tell these stories. And so like I I think that like for me, I'll speak for myself. For me growing up, when and how I did, I didn't see Black people that engage with the world like me in real life or in stories like ever, right? And so, like, part of justice is the stories we see and the stories we tell. Part of justice is the things that beautify our lives, that soothe us, right? And so, like, I want to create things that beautify the movement for people like me because other people aren't thinking about people like me specifically. When I say somebody who is a twin, who was taken, whose twin was then rehomed, who grew up in a sundown town, nobody is thinking about that specific demographic. So, like, I will then. I will tell stories for them.
Okay. And we receive your stories. And my final question that I ask all of the guests is, where in your life are you courageous?
Mm. Mm. At acknowledging. I was just writing something yesterday, inspired by Toni Morrison and honoring Fannin Jeffers. And it's on my Substack. I don't remember what it's called, but I was talking about like courageously acknowledging that we were needed, and that it was an exculpatory archaeological dig type of need. Um, because it's hard to acknowledge that like the truth is these white people needed me. That's hard to acknowledge, like, to get to that point and then understand the ways that it happened. Well, it's because they needed, it really was about their needs. Like, if I can just be honest about that. And so where I'm trying to be courageous is in acknowledging, is that honesty of like, well, here's the facts. My pop said he hired a private investigator to come looking and y'all moved us every time they found us. And little, like, my memory says we moved a bunch. So like, what a quinky dink. So I'm trying to be courageous at acknowledging things.
Well, it sounds like you are courageous, present tense, with all the work that you're doing and how you are showing up in the world. So thank you so much, Matthew. How can people support you and connect with you?
Yeah, appreciate that. They can become free or paid subscribers to my Substack called Creative Kindred. That's where you can get my writing to your inbox. And then I've got a little zine project, which I'm calling a mixtape, that's going to come out later this year that y'all can buy. And then other than that, You Cannot Burn the Sun is available via weareholdingthis.org. And that's the digital download of my debut poetry collection that came out in 2020.
And I got that, folks. I got it. So you should too. It's wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. It was such a delight. And I look forward to seeing your work out there and seeing what happens next.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Another beautiful episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my guest today. If you liked this episode, the best way to support me and this work is to write an iTunes review, a 5-star review. This helps us reach the top of searches and helps more people to find us. And if you personally want to connect, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook. And I have some great resource material on my website at laniceantoineshelley.com. So go on over there too. Until next we meet, go gently and have courage, my love.